are now officially under 24 hours away from the deadline in which the Eagles have to condense their roster down to 53. They started that process yesterday. If you haven't checked out that video, there will be a link in the description below. But they continued that journey today with some more roster moves. And if that's not all, they also tried out a player and handed another a contract extension. So there's a lot of news to get through today. Something like this where there's so much going on, I feel like the best thing to do is to just sit back and have a chat with you guys as if we're at a bar. So sit down, grab yourself a beer, relax. Let's get into the news. First bit of news today was that Craig James, the cornerback, was handed a one-year contract extension worth $1.1 million. Now, there are several levels to this that we need to get into, and obviously, it's going to pack the roster in quite a major way, given that depth at cornerback is already quite an intriguing conversation. The main thing I want to discuss here is special teams, because Craig James actually led the team in special teams tackles last year. So even though he may not have been a lock to make the roster as a cornerback, given the depth that they've got, the fact that his special teams prowess has been noted, to me, speaks volumes, and I think that should be reflected throughout the rest of the roster, because Dave Phipp's special teams unit has been gutted in recent years. We've lost players such as Camu Grugier-Hill. Trey Burton was another massive loss, someone that was once a key contributor and another tackle leader on that unit. There's been a lot of turnover. You get that with most teams, but Phipp wanting to push the emphasis on special teams this year speaks a lot. Like, TJ Edwards was impressive on special teams last year. I think Alex Singleton really stood out on special teams last year. Keeping all of those guys around is absolutely key. I said before, my bold prediction was that all 6 linebackers will make this roster purely under the guise of special teams. I stand by that, and if anything, I think this move absolutely reinforces that belief that Dave Phipp has a push in these roster conversations. Now, Craig James is of course best known for that pass breakup which fell into the hands of Nigel Bradham against the Green Bay Packers, sealing the victory, but he won't be pushing for a cornerback role, at least to begin with. Now, the interesting part of that is, well, where is he going to sit on the roster? Will he make it as a corner? Will they list him as a safety? Or maybe, just maybe, move someone else? Because as we know, Grayland Arnold didn't make the roster. And if you were to take a look at the cornerback depth chart right now, you've got Darius Slay on one side with, of course, Avonte Maddox at CB2. In the slot, it's Nickel Roby-Coleman and Cravon Blanc. And the one guy behind Darius Slay, well, this is a discussion. It's either Rasul Douglas or it's Sidney Jones. And in an ideal universe, you'd keep both of them. You'd have Jones behind Maddox, Douglas behind Slay. What we've got now, ladies and gentlemen, is a situation where Craig James and a curveball thrown into that roster means that we may lose Sidney Jones or Rasul Douglas. Now, Douglas himself is in a very intriguing situation. You may or may not remember that he actually restructured his contract earlier this offseason, basically giving him a minimum deal, which was a smart move because it meant that if the Eagles were going to cut ties with him, they couldn't say, oh, well, it's because his play doesn't match the pay grade. And if it was level on par with someone else, let's say a Trevor Williams or a Sidney Jones, and they're neck and neck, well, salary cap hit then favors Rasul Douglas, would save the money by cutting the more expensive player. The other thing is, it would impact another team if they were going to trade for him. That never happened, but it was just a smart move overall by Douglas. What we have now, though, is one cornerback who has missed a string of practices in training camp in Sidney Jones, who has clearly lost the CB2 battle, which I thought was going to be the most prominent of training camp, and is now on the edge of that roster. On the other end of it, in the same contract year, you've got someone that hasn't missed a practice, has played relatively well, is learning under Darius Slay, and has shown a willingness to improve his footwork. The difference between them is where they were drafted. As we all know, the Eagles took a flyer on Sidney Jones in the second round, someone that could have easily been a first-round pick had it not been for that Achilles, but it's really failed to live up to that expectation. Is this the year the Sidney Jones experiment ends? Has Craig James, of all people, just ended the Sidney Jones experiment? I don't know, like, this is going to be a very, very intense 24 hours. The team may well keep both corners. I would love to see them keep both Jones and Douglas. We know injuries really do derail this position during this era of football, and you never really know when one of them might come in handy. Now, if they are not keeping Grayland Arnold, maybe they're going to PUP someone such as Alshon Jeffrey. Maybe they're going to go one lighter at another position, but I think there is a very, very strong chance we lose one of those players. What do you guys think? Who would you keep? Who would you let go? Let me know in the comments. Second bit of news was obviously one of a tryout, and this was that Cordy Glenn, a former left tackle of both the Bengals and most majorly known from the Buffalo Bills, was working out with the Eagles. He ranked 38 out of 69 tackles last year with a 68 overall grade, allowing 4 sacks according to PFF, which is about average. It's a very serviceable grade for a primary backup or a near starter. Like, he's in that range, which isn't bad. That's all the Eagles could kind of hope for at this point. Now, the thing to note here is if they do get Cordy Glenn on what I assume would be a minimum deal, they're then going to go down one of 2 paths. A, Jason Peters moves to left tackle, you pay him anyway, and you've got a strong tackle group once again, a high-level starter, and a medium-level backup, which enables Matt Pryor to thrive at right guard, a spot he is far more familiar with, and of course thrived against Seattle last year. Second part is that Cordy Glenn becomes your starting left tackle, which still does take the pressure off Mailata, and then you leave whatever happens at right guard, whether it's Peters or Pryor. I still think it's Matt Pryor. I've said since day one, Matt Pryor's your starting right guard. And you go, do you know what, JP? We're not giving in anymore. We're standing firm. You've tried your luck. You've tried to rinse it dry. You can shut up and sit on the sideline for a bit. You don't have that weight anymore. I think that could be an intriguing option. So one of those 2 paths the team would go down if they sign Glenn. Now, it's not exactly feasible that they will. It was just a workout. And given the current climate, you can't really expect Cordy Glenn to come in as a 30-year-old a week before the season, get the playbook down, get the reps down, and then face Chase Young in week 1. It would not be a vibe. So I don't know. I'd be okay with the move. I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't love it, but I wouldn't hate it. That brings us on to the roster cuts. There are a few more today to keep an eye on, and we're going to run through them as quickly as we can. With Michael Jackett, was an undrafted free agent this year, defensive back, didn't make the cut. Again, one of those guys on the outside looking in, unfortunately. Caleb Wilson, the tight end, didn't make the roster, which pretty much all but confirms that Noah Togai will be your TE3. So the Eagles have their 3 tight ends now with Josh Perkins injured. Would have been intriguing to see what would have happened if Perkins was around. Would they have waived Togai? Would they have kept Josh Perkins? Had 4 tight ends on the roster. Who knows? Either way, Caleb Wilson's not making the roster. Again, was a bit of a long shot. I'd have liked to see them keep 4 like they did in the good old days. And by good, I mean 2014, but wasn't to be. Defensive end Matt Leo, who was part of the NFL's International Pathway program and did not count against a roster spot. That's very important to note. He's been waived, will be signed to the practice squad, where also he won't count against a roster spot. So very much a Jordan Mailata level player there. Keep an eye on him. Trevor Williams, this one hurt. I was kind of hoping they'd keep him around, but unfortunately, that's why I didn't mention him earlier in the video. The former LA Charger has been cut. So it's literally going to come down to how much depth do the Eagles want at corner. Will they keep Jones and Douglas, or do they favor one over the other? It's going to be a very, very twitchy day or so for both of those cornerbacks. I was personally rooting for Trevor Williams. Went on Twitter today and everyone's like, oh, I can't believe anyone thought he'd make the roster. And I was just like, just watch the film, man. Like, he was really good in 2018. I fell sucker for it. He didn't make the team. I'll put my hands up. Look, sorry, every prediction can't be Boston Scott and Crayvon LeBlanc. All right, sometimes you miss. I love what I saw in 2018. I'm sure he's going to land on another team soon. Maybe it was health. The shortened off season really didn't help him there with no preseason to prove himself. And he came back with like 3 practices until the end of camp anyway. So who knows? And then T.Y. McGill was also waived. He was signed very late on in proceedings after the injury to Javon Hargrave. Now, luckily, Hargrave's okay. He was just there as depth. I don't think McGill was ever really going to be a lock to make this roster. And those 5 defensive tackles they've got right now, Richie Cox, Malik Jackson, Javon Hargrave, Anthony Rush, and Hassan Ridgeway, all very, very good defensive tackles. I think they should all make the roster. Anthony Rush on the edge. I think he may slip down to the practice squad as he did a year ago. But overall, I think those will be the players to man that rotation. It'll be a 4 or 5 man group. McGill was always on the outside looking in, almost head to head with Raekwon Williams, who's even further back, but should be a practice squad candidate. And that, guys, is all your Eagles news for today. So I'm glad we got through that. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and make sure you drop your comments down below. I love hearing your thoughts. I know how emotional fans get at this time, right? These are the players we root for all off season long. We spend hours watching tape, getting to know the underdogs, wishing them well, hoping they can cause a surprise. And sometimes our hearts are broken, other times it's a dream wedding. I want to know who your underdog sleepers are. How are they faring? Are they on the team? Are they cut? Let me know, guys. I'll see you tomorrow.